Hi, and welcome to today's episode or show or whatever you want to call it about demystifying the Jenkins parent. Well, actually, what is it? Yeah, demystifying the parent POM for the Jenkins plugins. My name is Darren Pope. I am a developer advocate for CloudBees, and to help explain this, I have along with me Mark Waite. Mark, how are you doing?
Just great, Darren. Thanks
Did I
for
get that
letting me
title
talk
right?
about this.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of, I guess, an extension of what we did probably about 2 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, when we were talking about, what was it? It was bringing the plugin infrastructure into the modern century, I guess.
Yeah.
What was the better way of saying that?
Well, so we really did go through a series of steps to modernize a plugin. Ultimately, we published it as a tutorial called Improve a Plugin. And it takes a series of steps that lets any contributor submit reasonable and small pull requests to any plugin that will help that plugin move into the modern era. Today's session, though, is much more focused on maintainers. So a contributor should not submit some of the things that we're going to discuss today. You need to be a maintainer. It's a maintainer decision on some of the things we'll talk about today.
So, but the key part to all of that is that these things still need to be done.
Well, and they are reasonable choices that a maintainer can make in order to choose to reduce their workload for the future, and that for me is the choice here. It's like some of these things are in fact compromises where the maintainer has to make a choice. Yeah, I'll do a little bit of work now because it will reduce my work later.
Speaking of reducing work later, there was a time when Jenkins plugins could be in a language other than Java, right?
There was, yeah, that's true.
And that is no longer.
That is also true, right? So
So
we
put
had
that away.
well we had there was a period where Jenkins plugins could be written in Python or in Ruby, and they would, in the case of Python, they would be actually interpreted by Jython inside the Java virtual machine that was running Jenkins. And in the case of Ruby, they'd be interpreted by JRuby inside the Jenkins virtual machine. However, they were rather tightly locked to Java 8. And when we made the switch to Java 11, we dropped support for JRuby plugins and for Jython-based plugins.
And the
So-
world rejoiced.
Write it in Java, right? Write it
Write
in
it in
Java.
Java.
It's a lot easier to maintain for you, for everybody. Yeah.
Which, at what point was the whole parent POM concept brought in? Obviously, it was
It's-
brought in well before then.
Oh yeah, so I've not even looked at the history. The concept of the parent POM for plugins, I think, probably goes all the way back to the earliest plugins. Haven't looked to be sure, but it's a very common concept in Apache Maven. Having a parent POM that is used to give good settings to other POMs is a very common thing.
Okay, so I think you just sort of explained it right then. A parent POM is the upper level to feed all the other POMs below it.
Correct. That's right. So what it is it's a way of giving some good settings that everybody else can use. So we have one plug-in parent POM and on the order of 2,000 plugins that can consume that one thing. So when it's time to make a change that needs to affect the entire set of plugins, some setting needs to be updated, we can do it in one place, and then they decide when they'd like to adopt it by when they choose to use a new version of the parent POM.
How many versions of the parent POM are being used today?
Oh, there's a wide number. So just looking at the version numbers of current POMs, we're currently on version 4.77. So in the major version 4, there have already been 76 preceding POM versions. We revise the parent POM pretty frequently.
How frequently? Like daily?
No, like think every quarter is not uncommon. Every month, sometimes. The most recent release of the plugin parent POM was one I actually did, and I think it had been 2 or 3 months since the preceding release.
Do you remember what change you made?
Yeah, I was
that release?
turning on spot bugs with the latest version of spot bugs. Not turning it on. I was upgrading from a previous version of Spotbugs to a new version of Spotbugs.
So what are the types of things? So you talked about spot bugs there, but what are like a common change? Like if we were in that quarterly thing, is there something that every quarter this really should be done? Or is that just, it just depends?
Yeah, nothing comes to mind. I imagine there are some things that are relatively common, but most of the time what I see as things that drive a new release of the plug-in pump. Well, actually, we could look at it, Darren, if we want
Let's
to
do
take a
that.
look at it, because it's fun to see some of the things that cause a revision. So if you go to Jenkins CI slash plugin dash POM on GitHub, we'll be able to look at the releases there, and we can see something about it.
Okay. If I can type. Plugin dash POM,
Plugin dash POM, right?
singular. It's okay. I'll put you to sleep pretty quick. No problem. Okay, so this is the parent POM for Jenkins plugins. So
Right, and over
this
on
is
the right-hand side is the releases thing
Yep.
that's there. If you click releases, we can look, all right, so what happened on 4.77 about 2 weeks ago? We got a new Jenkins test harness and a new Spotbugs Maven plugin.
Okay.
Okay, if you scroll down a little bit or
I'll have to
go
switch
into
to-
releases, right, 4.76 was released in December. That one intentionally made a change that said PowerMock is not allowed.
Right.
And it did that because PowerMock is no longer maintained. And with PowerMock no longer being maintained, we want developers to stop using it, because if they continue using it, they can't go to Java 17 and Java 21.
And that would be a
Likewise,
problem.
That is a problem. That absolutely. The other thing that this one did, ban the Jenkins test harness in compile scope. That's a really fun one, because what happened was some plugin maintainers made mistakes in their dependency definitions and ended up including 10 and 20 megabytes of unnecessary test components, which then when they tried to load it into Jenkins caused all sorts of surprises. So this says, no, we refuse to allow you to use the Jenkins test harness in compile scope. You have to use it in test scope.
Okay. Which sort of makes sense.
It does, right. It's a test tool.
And then if we look back, the one previous to that was the end of October.
Right.
And
And
then-
again, this one was fixing some workarounds, removing some workarounds that had been put in. If you go one more back, I think you'll see again it's right, about a month prior.
Yeah. So just out of curiosity, since we're looking at this, because we're trying to demystify it, because we'll look and see where it's being used. But to me, when I take a look at, there we go, plus 100 releases. Why did that not? Oh, that's what I wanted, tags. Okay, so let's, I wish, if anybody from GitHub is watching, give me a go to end, please, and go to beginning. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just that would be very useful, especially for this scenario.
Right.
Because we were trying to remember, okay, when did this all start out? Well, if we just take a look at this, we're not even back to 4. I'm trying to get to pre-4. Okay, there's the first 4.0 in April of 2020. Mm-hmm. There's betas. Okay, the last 3 was
55.
December of 19. So, what caused the 3 to 4?
I confess I don't remember.
Don't remember.
I don't know.
Okay.
I would have to go read change logs to be able to give you an answer. I just don't
No,
remember.
thank you. Okay. Anyway, I was trying to see if there's anything. There's no quick way for me to do it. Anyway, so this is something that's just used by a plugin maintainer, key point, maintainer.
Right.
How do they use it?
So what they do, and if you'll go to the Git client plugin, let's look at how it's used.
Okay.
So here is an example plugin. It happens
Right.
to be a plugin I maintain. In the pom.xml file of this plugin, we see right at the very near the top the parent section, and
Okay.
what it says is what's the parent POM. In this case, the parent POM is org.jenkinsci.plugins.plugin version 4.77.
Right.
So this is it. This is me saying I want release 4.77 of the plugin parent POM.
Is there a bottom of parent POM that's allowed right now?
Well, so it depends.
Okay.
We see some really old parent POMs, but inevitably when we see them is when we're about to do the improve a plugin tutorial steps to modernize the plugin.
Right. So it's not necessarily abandoned, but hasn't been touched in a very long time, or some variation of that, or maybe abandoned.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon for a plugin that's not had a lot of active maintenance or is badly out of date or is coming back to life, for it to have a very old version. And one of the first steps is follow the Improve a Plugin tutorial to upgrade the parent POM to current version.
So let me restate my question. For plugins that are active,
Uh-huh.
how old do we see back? So if it's active, most people are probably keeping it up to date within a
Right,
year's worth or something.
For me, if I see a parent POM version in this case that's older than about 4.40, I'm surprised. They're
Okay.
quite commonly 4.60 and later. So yeah, within roughly the last year is a pretty common value for parent POM.
And I guess really, like with 77, the new version of spot bugs came in. But if I don't really care about spot bugs, does that matter?
Actually, it does matter, because one of the things that the plugin POM gives us is automatically configured spot bugs checks. And so I'm building my plugin. When I run Maven Clean Verify, it builds and runs spot bugs. And it tells me if there are warnings. By upgrading to a new version of spot bugs, I got new warnings. And so the choice to go to plugin POM 4.77 means I'll get new spot bugs checks that weren't running before. Those new checks may in fact require new suppressions or new code changes, because they are in fact new static analysis checks.
And I guess some people might be saying, well, and if you're a plugin maintainer already, you already know this, but if you're thinking about becoming a plugin maintainer, or you're being, let's say you weren't a maintainer, but now you're becoming a maintainer, it's like, well, I could just specify those spot bug changes. But if you're playing by the rules, if you take a look at the Jenkins file, there's nowhere for you to specify those changes, right? Because there is build plugin.
Correct. So spot bugs is an interesting one, where we should spend some more time talking about spot bugs. We can do that now if you'd like, because there's
Sure.
so one of the key features, one of the things that I really love about the plugin parent POM is it in fact does do spot bugs checks. Spot bugs is a very capable Java static analyzer. It looks at your Java bytecode and detects patterns that are likely indicators of bugs. Now, static analysis has been for years a very challenging thing, to not have an awful lot of false positives, an awful lot of things that say, this might be a problem but isn't. Spot bugs is quite good at not misleading you into thinking something's a problem. It's very good, for instance, at detecting null pointer exceptions, better than most human beings who do code reads. So use spot bugs and be grateful for it. Now, you may detect cases where, I've thought about this condition that spot bugs is warning me about, and I just simply do not want spot bugs to warn me anymore. Darren, we can look at an example of that now in the Git client plugin.
Okay. So show me.
In the src directory, there's a subdirectory named spot bugs.
Okay.
And in there is excludesfilter.xml. So this thing is a specification of exactly which things have been reviewed by a plugin maintainer, and the plugin maintainer has said, I do not intend for spot bugs to warn me about this any longer. And there are actually two sections to this. Basil Crow has taught me this really elegant thing. The top section is, I've thought about these, and I intentionally am not working on them. The bottom section says, herein lies technical debt. All right, these are things that haven't been analyzed yet, and they need to be thought about. And if they are proven to be false positives, they should move up. The code should be fixed to repair them.
Right. So basically the top is tombstone. It's like, I'm not dealing with these.
Correct.
The bottom is, I really should take a look at these, but they may be okay and they may not be. I just don't know,
Right.
but I can't deal with it now.
Correct. Because it's static analysis, there are no bug reports in this case, for example, for the Git client plugin that say these things are problems. It's just that Spotbugs warns, and I haven't spent the time yet to analyze them and decide are they real problems or not.
So I'm assuming this file did not exist at the beginning.
That's correct. It did not.
So if you're using the parent POM 4.77, Spotbugs is going to be run for you whether you like it or not.
Correct.
And if you decide, okay, I'm getting all these spot bugs and I'm getting inner class should be static anon, okay, I can go ahead and short circuit that. So that means I would have to go inside of source spot bugs, add the exclude filter, and this is just magic for spot bugs. Or actually Maven plus spot bugs, I would assume.
Right. What happens is the plugin parent POM configures the Spotbugs plugin to look in this location for an excludes filter.
We have to be careful with the use of plugin. The Maven plugin.
The Maven, right. Maven is told by the parent POM to look for this file for an exclusions filter. So I didn't have to say anything in my POM file. I just create this file and it is read for me automatically.
Right. So this is sort of the magic that we were promised through dependency injection and everything else that happened with Spring Framework, in my opinion.
Yeah, this is
right.
This is really prefer good defaults, right?
If you follow the default, if you follow the default, things will just happen.
That's right.
We like that because I don't want to. You said it earlier. Roughly 2,000 Jenkins plugins.
Right.
Would you want to go around and chase, hey, we just made a change, so now we need to go update the POM XML on every one of these 2,000?
Yeah,
No.
you just described it, particularly given the varying states of those plugins. It's a lot of work. When we swept through the top 250 most popular plugins to configure them to test for Java 17 and Java 21, we spent a good month or month and a half getting that done because it required negotiating with each of those plugin maintainers saying, hey, could you please merge this pull request? It's work to touch those things. We'd much rather the maintainers do it themselves.
And allow the project to give the sane parent, or what the project has defined as a sane parent.
Correct.
Okay. So that's interesting. So I put in a parent block. I give my definition of which version I want.
Mm-hmm.
If I give an invalid version, what happens?
Maven will crash.
Maven will crash.
Maven
Good.
crash. Maven will tell you, I can't resolve the version you requested. So if this thing were changed to 4.78, Maven would just fail to compile. It would say, I'm sorry, I can't resolve plugin for version 4.78.
Again, that's just Maven.
That is
doing
that's
Maven
just
things.
Maven doing Maven things.
Okay. Where should we head next? Or what should we discuss next?
Well,
What do you think?
so let's see. We've talked about spot bugs. I've got a personal favorite. If you're okay, we're going to go to a personal favor that's another form of spotless, not spot bugs.
Okay.
Okay, so scroll down a little bit on this page. We're going to look at one line in the properties section.
Okay.
The very last line before the end of the properties section, line 71, spotless.check.skip false.
Okay.
Okay, so that one line enables automatic source code formatting for this repository. So one of the problems I had as a plugin maintainer was wildly different formats between different files in the plugin in its history. The Git plugin is notorious for this. It's been maintained over the course of 10 plus years by 10 or 15 different people with submissions from another 20 or 30, each one in slightly different styles, so that reading the thing becomes really painful because the braces are in a different place in this file than that file, or white space is used differently in this file than that file. This one line, spotless.check.skip, false. So what that says is, shall I skip the spotless check? And the answer is no, do not skip it. And by doing this, every time I run a Maven clean verify, it will check that my source code is formatted per standards. And that includes the POM file and all the Java files.
So it does a verify, but does it actually give you, does it tell you what to do, or does it fix it for you? What does it do?
All it does is tell you there's a problem, and then the way you fix it is you say Maven space spotless : apply.
Ah.
Now this is one of those changes that a contributor who is not a maintainer should not waste their time submitting this change.
A reformat change, right?
Right,
Reformat
exactly.
doesn't- Okay.
Because a reformat change is a significant change, and the maintainer needs to be clear that they accept they're going to do that. In my case, I needed to visit every pull request that was pending for the Git client plugin and be sure that it would be okay with the new formatting. And so that's one of the reasons why other plugins that I maintain do not yet do this, because I could not visit all the pull requests and make sure they were okay with the change of formatting.
Right. So basically, what this tells me is by default, spotless check skip is true.
Correct. Right.
And you're basically saying, okay, I've got everything done. Now make it false and just go ahead and enforce it all the time.
Right. Now I'm pleased to note of the 250 most popular plugins, over 60 of them have already enabled this. So it's not just a few of us who are benefiting from this setting, but it is something you have to do with thought, and it's really a maintainer choice, not a contributor choice.
Let me ask this question, because right above spotless, and this is sort of, we're trying to demystify, because I'm assuming spotless is also in the parent POM.
Spotless.check.skip is in the parent POM, and its value
Right.
is set in the parent POM to true.
True. But here with spot bugs, I notice you've overridden both effort and threshold.
Right.
So what does that, I mean, obviously it means something, but what does it really mean?
Yeah, so in the parent POM, spotbugs.effort, I think, is set to medium, or it's set to something other
Well, let's
than
look at
max.
it. Let's
Oh,
look
yeah,
at it.
That's good.
Because we're here, why not?
Right, why not?
So it's just the POM XML that we need to look at, right?
I think so. Look for spotbugs.effort, and let's see if we can find it.
Okay. Actually, it's probably,
If you do a slash, it will do a search for you.
oh, that's right. I keep forgetting about that. GitHub, I sort of was mean earlier. This is really nice.
I agree. This is awesome.
Spotless.
No, yes, you're welcome to do spotless. I was thinking you wanted to do spot bugs.
Oh, spot bugs, sorry. Thank you. Spotbugs.effort. That's what we're looking at.
Yeah,
Oops.
just do spot bugs. Because there won't be that many matches. So look in the code. Oh, whoops, it wants you to sign in.
Okay, I'm just going to go back old school.
Yeah, that's fine.
Spot bugs. Emit visitors.
Okay, keep going.
Okay,
Keep going.
bugs, effort. Here, I'll just, oh, there's no effort. There's skip.
Oh, maybe this is a setting that's only for the Spotbugs plugin itself, and it's relying on the default from the Maven Spotbugs plugin.
Regardless,
Could
though,
be.
here's the spotless
Right.
set to true.
Yep.
Okay. So all these defaults are set here. All the versions are set here in the plugin
Correct.
POM.
Right.
So if for some reason I was ready to upgrade JUnit from 5.10.1 to 6, whatever,
Right.
it would go here, and then whoever has subscribed to at that point 78 or whatever it would be would then get that version to use.
Correct. Well, and let's go one line above the example you just gave.
Okay.
Rather than JUnit. JUnit doesn't revise terribly frequently, but
That's
the one
true.
right above it,
Oh, yeah.
Jenkins Test Harness, does.
Quite a bit.
Right? The Jenkins Test Harness is the set of test methods and test classes that we use to test Jenkins at all sorts of levels, and therefore it's revised quite frequently. And
Right.
therefore, a developer may say, I need to temporarily test new version of Jenkins Test Harness even before the plugin parent POM has it. And they would just insert this property into their property section with their value, and off they go.
Right. And then remember to not commit that until this is
Well,
brought, or leave it in for a while and then pull it back out. Okay.
correct.
As a maintainer, you have to be up to speed on everything, is what I'm getting.
As a maintainer, it's good to be aware of the things around you. Yeah, now I've been ignorant of the things around me for a long time, and I've survived as a maintainer, but the more I've become aware of things around me, the better off I've been.
If the inception year is correct, plugin POM started in 2016.
Yeah, and that's interesting, and it could be. I sincerely don't know because for the longest time, Jenkins Core has had its own parent POM,
Right.
and it may have been that plugins were using the Jenkins parent POM rather than their own dedicated POM.
Could be. Don't know the history. But regardless, that's what we're going with. Okay, so let's go back over here. So we talked about the overrides for this.
Mm-hmm.
You chose to go ahead and do max and low. Basically, you're being as mean to yourself as possible. That's what I'm seeing here.
Right.
Okay.
This was try to be as aggressive, and this is exactly the setting that the Improve a Plugin tutorial guides people to do. So, but it's not the default for spot bugs, and for some plugins, it's distracting. Right? It's just too much if you set it to that level. So, choose carefully. Look at the results as you try this.
Okay. Where do we need to head next?
Well, so we've talked about spot bugs. We've talked about spotless. We could either talk about a relatively simple thing like Jenkins documentation as code, or we could get into deeper things like code coverage. Which do you prefer, Darren?
It feels like we need to do code coverage.
Okay, let's do code coverage. Let's talk about code coverage then. All right, so one of the things that code coverage is available for users of the Jenkins plugin parent POM through a profile. Maven has the concept of profiles. A profile is a way to configure Maven to do certain things, to add some extra configuration for this particular run of Maven. So I say Maven, MVN space minus capital P, and in the case of coverage, enable dash Jacoco. And when I do that, it now enables the build process to insert code coverage instrumentation and generate a report after the tests are completed of how that code coverage did. So code coverage, again, is provided because I use the plugin parent POM. All I have to do is enable this profile, and it will run it. Now, Darren, if you can bring up, go ahead. If you can bring up, I think in this plugin, contributing.adoc has an example of how people do this. So spot bugs checks, code formatting, testing a pull request, nope, maybe not. This one, does it have anything about?
Oh, here it is.
Oh, yes, there it is. Good. Okay, so it's missing. Some of the other contributing files I maintain have a little section that tells you after you run this what command you use in order to see the output on your computer, whether Windows, Mac OS, or Linux. This one doesn't. I'll need to add that.
Okay.
But let's look at an example of this.
All right.
So you've got on your screen I had a new contributor through Google Summer of Code who was interested in improving the test coverage of the embeddable build status plugin.
Right.
So what this is, the thing that Darren is showing now is the before condition before the contributor submitted their pull request. And Darren, if you can make this a little bit larger so that we can see perfect. Notice the very bottom row there, org.jenkinsci.plugins badge DSL. Its coverage is 32%. And now inside of that, the middle one, add embeddable badge config step, is only covered 50%. This was the before state. And the task that the contributor was taking was, I want to improve the coverage of add embeddable badge config step. So now if we go to the after view, notice here that DSL is 63%, so the percentage has gone up. And if you open it, you'll see that, oh wow, it's 89% coverage. Now, if you could open that, we can actually look at the source code view. And this all came just because I added minus capital P, enable Jacoco, and ran tests. I get all this. So click any one of those methods and let's look at the source code view of these things. So the green highlights are statements that are covered by automated tests. And if you scroll enough, we'll find one. Okay, there's one that's not covered. And if you go a little further down, we'll see some others. Okay, there are more things that aren't covered, and we hope someday in the future will be covered. But right now, the improvement here was these things got covered because this contributor offered them. Now, let's go look at how ci.jenkins.io helped me on this. So thanks to Uli Hoffner's Warnings Next Generation plugin, we get to see coverage reports. And any Jenkins user can configure these. This is not magic. What this does, you see on the screen here that this is a pull request, PR288, and its coverage report in the Indirect Changes tab says there were 2 files that were changed here. Embeddable badge config shows everything 100% plus 20% on branches, but then add embeddable badge config step plus 30% on the line coverage. So this was my initial confirmation. The contributor was successful. They increased the coverage. And it's all right there in Jenkins. So very, very nice to view.
So instead of having to look at it from just a raw Jacoco output,
right?
If I've got, is this from Uli's plugin?
It is. This is
okay.
Warnings NG. This
Warnings
is
NG.
Warnings NG doing its job.
Okay. I can follow in. So if you were to land on there, you would obviously land on overview first, and then you would go to indirect changes.
Correct.
To see this change.
And the difference there is I need the Jacoco generated report because when, as a developer, as I'm adding more tests and creating more coverage, I need to see, did this
That's your
get
cycle
covered?
time.
Exactly.
That's your local cycle.
Correct. Now, thankfully, most IDEs already include those kind of reports naturally in them. If I remember, IntelliJ does that very nicely.
Okay. So that's coverage. Mm-hmm. And we're able to do that because we did this running locally while we were iterating on the plugin.
Correct. So during development, if I enable the Enable Jacoco profile, I get coverage reporting.
But once it's actually built on ci.jenkins.io, it's there anyway, just because it's in build plugin, which also, because you're using a parent POM, has a dependency on Jacoco that's getting called.
You said it exactly right. So let's look at that. Go back to the ci.jenkins.io page that we're on, and instead of looking at the pull request, let's look at the master branch of this thing.
Okay.
So again, the coverage report here will tell us how we're doing. And what it says, now it's giving us a global view. Indirect changes in this case isn't terribly interesting, but it tells us what happened in the last commit.
Right.
The last commit did these improvements. Now, if you go to overview, we get to see what's the general health, and the image here is a really nice highlight. Hey, look, 5 or 6 commits ago, or in this case, 60 commits ago, back at 166, coverage was below 70%, and it's now above 80%.
Right.
So we've really had positive improvement by going through that. And yes, the controls, exactly that control you just did, is really cool. Uli has done such a good job on this.
Okay. Did coverage. You were wanting to talk about docs.
Oh yeah. Okay. So let's take a relatively easy one.
Okay.
So go back to the Git client plugins POM file.
Okay.
And here on line 17, you see a URL.
Yes.
That URL is used to extract the documentation that is then written to plugins.jenkins.io.
Okay. Stop.
Yes.
So to me, I'm looking at that and it's just saying github.com, GitHub repo variable.
Uh-huh.
Why do I need to include that in my POM XML?
Oh,
Because that looks very vanilla to me. Why do I need to put something vanilla in my POM XML?
because there are plenty of places where people might say, I want to host my plugin somewhere else. We were a little more open about this in the past, and now we're becoming much more rigorous. No, you got to host it in Jenkins org. But there have been all sorts of reasons why that thing needed to be there to tell us where we could look for your documentation.
And this isn't something, well, I guess you could, well, I'm thinking about properties, right? I would almost pull this in from a property, and the default would be this, what I'm looking at. That's what I'm thinking, but that's not what we're talking about right now. I'm just
And your point is a valid one, and it's that one is I don't know the history well enough to give you any backstory on why it is where it is right now.
okay. That's
a
fine.
good point.
All right. So let's come back to reality for a moment. So we have this,
Right.
and this is going to generate, because of the existence of this URL attribute in the base of the project.
Yep.
Yes, yes. There's some flow that's going to happen
Correct.
that's baked into the parent POM for the plugin that knows
that-
what to do with this.
Yeah, it's actually baked into the plugin site. It's the plugin site builder.
Plugin site builder.
It reads the POM file for each released plugin and reads this URL property and then goes and extracts that documentation. So if open up plugins.jenkins.io and let's go look at the Git client plugin there.
Okay. Okay.
Uh-huh. So among all the other things that are on this page, on the left-hand side is the contents of the README file from the Git client plugin.
Right. So if we come back over here, the README shows. There it is.
Right.
Now notice this is a README A doc. Does it have to be an A doc?
No. In fact, most maintainers prefer Markdown.md. In my case, I prefer ADoc because it made my life simpler.
Okay.
But for the typical maintainer and for the vast majority of plugins, it's a Markdown file.
Okay. So it basically slurps the README in,
Right?
whether ADoc or MD,
Right?
and splats it here.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and for me, what does that mean? It means I can write the documentation when I write the code change. And they go in as a single thing, code and documentation. When they're released, the code and the documentation are both picked up and placed onto the plugin site.
Well, that just seems too simple.
Exactly.
I mean, it should be harder than that.
And that's one of the goals here is make it simple for plugin maintainers, right? We do not want to have require plugin maintainers to do a bunch of extra push-ups. The alternative that had been there for years was write your documentation on the Jenkins wiki. Well, the Jenkins wiki went read-only in about 2021, and you can't update it anymore. Since you can't update it, you've got to transition to this if you were using the Jenkins wiki for documentation in the past.
And where is that at right now?
So we're at about, what I think, 300 or more plugins that have completed the transition, and we continue making progress.
Okay. All right, so that's good. So docs as code is a good thing, always.
Right?
But I notice you have some other docs in here. Does anything
Yeah.
else matter, or is it just the README?
Just the README. The
Okay.
rest of those things are just me taking notes for myself. The contributing doc is there to help people who want to help with the plugin, but it's not presented to users on the plugin site.
So for README, again, I'm going to be pedantic here. Is it README all uppercase?
I think it is. I've never asked
Okay.
to see if you could use mixed case. It's always that I've seen been either all uppercase readme.md or all uppercase readme.adoc.
Right. Okay. So that's docs. So let's get back to the parent. So because of the existence in the POM for this plugin, but did this have anything to do really with the parent POM?
No,
Not
other
really?
than not really. No.
Okay.
That's just at least I don't think it does, because I don't think the parent POM sets any default for that.
Okay. It should.
I don't know that I want it to, but okay, that's one we'll have to talk with somebody who knows more about it than I do.
Yeah, I know. What else? I mean, okay, so I'm looking at this parent, and it's got 4 attributes. And I notice relative path is empty. Now, I'm assuming all of this is just standard Maven-y type stuff.
It is.
Right, that's
correct.
just Maven stuff. Are there any other parameters that we need to be concerned with?
Yeah, well, so
parent
yeah,
POM?
I'd say let's take a couple more. So let's
Okay.
go down to, let's see, how should this is a fun one, because go to the contributing doc,
Okay.
and let's talk about one of the challenges for plugins that are heavily used. Scroll all the way to the bottom. So the Java micro benchmark harness is a set of Java tools that allow you to create very, very small benchmarks. And truly, they are benchmarking very tiny capabilities. We used it in this case a few years ago as part of a Google Summer of Code project to compare the performance of JGit, the pure the pure Java implementation of Git, and command line Git. And in doing that comparison, we were able to find places where we should choose JGit because it was actually faster than command line Git. And other places where, oh no, JGit is much slower than command line Git, use command line Git. So this Java micro benchmark harness gives plugin developers who are working on a plugin that is performance sensitive. Now, most plugins aren't, but this particular plugin is used frequently enough, we felt like it was worth the investment. So it allowed our Google Summer of Code contributor to write a series of Java micro benchmarks that compare command line Git and JGit in some very interesting use cases. And the cases were mostly related to size of the repository we were cloning. And what that micro benchmark then taught us was, oh, JGit's faster on small repositories and much, much slower on big ones.
Makes sense.
So if a plugin maintainer needs to benchmark, then the micro benchmark harness that's provided by the parent POM is the way to do it.
Because if it wasn't there, you'd have to figure all of this out.
Exactly right, and that's okay. We get the benchmark to run by just enabling a profile. That's all that has to be done here. There's no other exotic configuration, no crazy things inside the POM. It's just enable that profile and it works.
So is there a time on CI when benchmark is enabled?
No.
All right, so the only way you can do benchmark is locally during development,
Correct.
or you have to, if you're not doing it on your machine and you're benchmarking on a different machine, that's up to you to get the code over there to benchmark it yourself.
It is.
So,
and for me, that makes perfect sense because we take benchmark results with the intent of acting on the output. There's another tool like it that Uli Hofner uses called the, oh dear, what is it? PIT. It's a tester of the quality of your tests, and Uli uses it, but it's infrequent use because when you use it, just like this micro benchmark thing, when you use it, you need to be intentionally taking action on the results you see.
Right. So let's magic hand wave. You actually do maintain about 5 plugins?
More than
Ish?
that, but yeah, I
More
maintain several plugins. Yeah.
Okay. And if each one of those needed the micro benchmark harness and it wasn't in the parent POM, you'd be hosed. Because you'd have to go, you'd be copying and
Buckets of
pasting
work.
around.
Absolutely. Buckets of work that I don't want to have to do.
Okay. So that's another big plus for this is getting the common things that maintainers may or may not need.
Right.
And if it's there, activate a profile. Now, what if I was to find a new class of thing and I'm not the plugin POM maintainer?
Yeah.
And
If
what would I do?
you could submit a pull request to the plugin POM, Usually the first thing you do is open a question on the Jenkins developer mailing list saying, hey, I see this new thing. I'd like to solve the problem with this new thing. Is there a way to solve this problem already? Let the Jenkins developers on the mailing list talk about it, discuss it back and forth, because very frequently these very, very smart people on that list will already have a solution to the problem. And they'll offer it, or they'll have a very, very good idea that can get you closer to the solution than if you just tried to do it all on your own.
But let's say they didn't have a solution.
Yeah.
Then what's the process? Would they potentially do it? Could I put in a PR?
Yep.
Once we've decided, we've gone through the mailing list. We've done
Right.
all the, everybody's like, yeah, we should add that to the POM. Then what is protocol to actually get something added?
Yeah. Submit a pull request to the plugin POM repository. It'll be reviewed. Once the reviews are complete, it's deemed good enough, it will be merged and a new release of the plugin POM will be delivered.
And then at that point, you would upgrade your parent POM reference to
the
the
newer version, right?
And go on about business.
Correct. Yep. Now there's some other things that we should discuss. There's one that before we run out of time today, I want to be sure we talk about incrementals, Darren.
Okay.
So incrementals is one that it's not nearly as trivial to show by looking at the POM file, but let's talk about the real problem that plugin developers may have. I maintain two plugins as an example, the Git plugin and the Git client plugin. Sometimes I need to evaluate a new version of the Git client plugin without releasing it. And I want to evaluate it in a number of different places, not just on my local computer. I want to evaluate it on ci.jenkins.io. I want to check that in the plugin bill of materials it is well behaved before I risk releasing a copy of it to the world. Well, incrementals is the solution to doing that. I have two plugins, Git plugin on the one side, Git client plugin on the other, and I need to increment the Git client plugin for my own use and for use by others, but not release it. Incrementals is the thing. So let's go there, Darren.
Okay, so where are we going?
So let's go to jenkins.io and search for the word incrementals. So it's in the developer documentation. There we go. Enable increment. Oh, actually, even better than this one. Go back and search again. Pick the second one down. The incrementals developing components in parallel. That one.
Okay.
Right. So what this is a documentation page that tells developers how to do exactly what I just described. And we can do it with Jenkins Core, or we can do it in the place that I was describing where Git client needs to be a new version and Git plugin wants to consume it. We use it all the time in the plugin bill of materials when we're evaluating things. We use it in all sorts of ways. So if you click middle of your page, there's an incrementals documentation right above enabling incrementals, and it gives you a link to the detailed. Inside this is every little detail on how to make this thing go. The crucial value here is I can evaluate unreleased code very widely. Mm-hmm. So I can evaluate it on ci.jenkins.io. I can evaluate it on my own machine, all sorts of places, thanks to these incrementals.
As long as you have a parent POM of 310 or higher.
Right. Notice there's a good story that you don't get these things unless you keep yourself up to date with the parent POM.
Understood. Easy way, much better than the hard way.
Right. Easy way is much, much better than the hard way.
Okay. All right, so that's incrementals. We did coverage. We did, what else did we do?
So we talked about code formatting. Now there's one more.
Okay.
That I want to hit on. So let's go back to Git client plugin. We're going to look for one line. So
Okay.
pom.xml. I want you to look for the word fork count.
Fork. I got no fork.
Oh, okay. So
I have
let's
no
see.
fork.
Well, let's look in properties. Maybe I'm just remembering it wrong.
No, I'm searching the whole file. There is no fork.
Oh, interesting. So maybe I have to take you to. No way. Hang on just a minute. Now I've got to.
How about is it get plugin with fork, not get client?
No, no. Oh. Actually, you're right. You're right. Okay.
All right, so let me do this.
So no, it's in the Jenkins file. You're correct. I am showing my biases. Very nicely done. Very nicely done.
There it is, fork count.
Right. And there's a reason it's there and not in the POM file.
Okay,
I
why?
had this conversation.
Why? This
Right.
is
So let's first talk about what it is. Fork count here is telling Maven how many processes it can run in parallel to test my plugin. All right, so that's what it's telling Maven. It says you can run, and the 1C means one process per core. So if I've got a 12-core machine, it will run 12 independent Java processes to evaluate tests.
okay.
Now, that's very desirable for me in my environment because I have a separate machine that runs my tests, and I don't care how slow it is, so it runs all of them all the time.
Right.
However, there are other developers, other maintainers of plugins who noted, look, Mark, I build on my own computer, and when I run with fork count 1C, it bogs down my machine because it's using every resource the computer has available to run the tests. And I can no longer keep my window manager busy. I can no longer compile anything else.
Right.
So this setting is also available in the POM file, but we intentionally keep it out of the POM file so that developers choose for themselves what fork count value they want. So I misled you by saying it was in the POM file. It happens to be there, but not for any plugin that I maintain.
So let's go back over to the plugin POM. So if I was to look for fork here,
I don't think you'll find it, but
that's surefire fork number.
yeah, fork. I don't
That's
know
different.
What fork number even is. Yeah, interesting.
So there's
But now,
nothing there. Okay, so it's not there either.
If we look at a different place, the Jenkins plugin archetype. So if you were building a brand new plugin, you can use the Jenkins plugin archetype to create a framework for that plugin.
Right.
And the archetype offers you fork count 1C.
And that's probably in the POM, right?
I think it's in the Jenkins file even here.
Okay.
And it'll be in the prototype Jenkins file again. You don't
Oh,
want to,
right.
right? So it's
Empty plugin.
yeah, and I'm not sure where we would find the sources. I would assume it's in SRC something.
Really?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah. That's okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, regardless,
This
if you don't specify a fork count, it's a much nicer experience.
well, no, if you don't specify a fork count, you get one fork count of one, so it runs one process. And by choosing fork count of one, for many plugins, that's exactly the right choice. Most plugins, possibly, because if you're not running an awful lot of tests, greater than one fork count doesn't help you. A number of the plugins that I maintain don't use a fork count at all because it doesn't help them. This particular plugin, Get Client, has enough tests that if I don't run with a fork count greater than one, I don't get done in time. I don't finish the test fast enough.
Define in time.
I have 60 minutes to run these tests before they time out on ci.jenkins.io by default.
Okay. All right. Wow. Okay. So fork count. Fork count is important.
Yeah, it's at least useful. Again,
Yeah.
sorry, this is one where it's really not in the it shouldn't be set in pom.xml, but it is useful if you have a plugin that has lots of tests.
And if you don't have a lot of tests, don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. Don't waste the energy on it, right?
But if you have a lot of tests, or you're starting to hit that 60-minute limit and you're getting basically collected, this might be the answer to that.
Correct. That's right.
And this is provided through. Is this provided through the plugin POM though? I'm trying to track back to what you said, because
It,
without plugin POM existing, something in the plugin POM existing, this wouldn't matter anyway.
correct, right. So what happens here is build plugin passes an argument to Maven that sets the fork count value.
Okay. Good. Did we cover most everything that you wanted to cover, at least for the plugin POM?
We've covered all the topics that I wanted to cover.
Okay, good. So hopefully that was helpful for any maintainers or even contributors going, what am I getting myself into? This is what you're getting yourself into. I'm pointing at Mark, but I'm actually pointing at a screen that he can't see. I thought it was useful. It clarified some things for me. It confused me on a few things that I've got to go back and sort of watch this again and think about it. But the one takeaway I get from this, though, is if the plugin POM did not exist, the parent plugin POM did not exist, life as a maintainer would be pretty darn miserable, I think. Maybe not if you're just working on a single plugin. It may not be that big of a deal, but if you're maintaining a couple of plugins, even two, it becomes really valuable really fast.
Right. Well, and knowing the tools that are available to you can help simplify your life as a plugin maintainer. Knowing that coverage reporting is available, use it. If you need micro benchmarks, use them. If you need incrementals, use them. They're available. It's sad to reinvent something only to discover, oh, already had it, it's here, and it's this easy to use.
What is the easiest way to figure out what's available to me? Well, that'd be the last big question, because there seems I need to be able to interrogate what's there before I start recreating something from scratch.
Good question. So Maven actually has a help command, help : and the Maven command help can list the profiles, for example, and it can list the effective POM. What the effective POM is the combination of all the parent POMs that there may be and the current POM, so you can actually see all the details of the configuration if you do Maven help : effective -POM. So
this is screaming. I basically need to run the Maven help to get my effective POM, and I need to feed that to AI to give me the English version of what the heck is available.
Well, and that's why we do this session, right? Because many of the things that are in the effective POM are irrelevant to a maintainer. They're useful, but the maintainer doesn't say, oh, that's really important. Spotless, for me, was one of those where, you know what? Somebody had to tell me, hey, look, automatic cone formatting is available, and here's all you have to do to use it.
Free formatting. Yay.
Yes.
Okay. So hopefully that was helpful to everybody that's watched this. Almost an hour. I can't believe we actually talked for an hour about the Jenkins plugin POM, parent plugin POM. There's too many words. We'll be back in 9 days-ish. It's on a Thursday. That'll be the 8th, if I'm doing my date math right. Talking about the other POM, which is the core POM,
Right.
which maybe we'll know by then how it's related back to the plugin POM. Maybe there's something there. I don't know. If you are watching this before FOSDEM, which is happening this weekend, Mark is going to be at FOSDEM, assuming that the planes all get there on time and
Right.
they can land, and other things that are happening. Chocolate will be consumed. I assume that. Probably some tea. Well, no, probably not any tea to be drinking, but hey, it's Belgium. There is a Jenkins Contributor Summit going on, starting on Saturday? Friday. I knew that.
Friday at 10 o'clock. You can go to community.jenkins.io to see the agenda. We're full now. We've got all the people who can attend that will fit into the room. We're really excited. This looks to be the best, the biggest, the most effective contributor summit we've ever had. 4 of the 5 officers will be there, or 4 of the 5 board members will be there. Every officer will be there, and a bunch of contributors. We're looking forward to it. It's going to be a great time.
Now, is there going to be a Jenkins booth at FOSDEM somewhere?
There will be. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. And we'll have people staffing it, and we'll be talking about it. And I think we're going to be selling T-shirts, and we're going to have stickers. So yes, absolutely.
Sounds good. I won't be there.
We'll miss you, Darren.
Yeah, but anyway, it'll be fun. So anyway, if you are going to FOSDEM this weekend, look out for everybody at the Jenkins table. And Mark, thank you. And again, we'll be back in roughly 9 days to talk about the other POM, which is actually probably the more important POM when it all boils down.
Yeah, I think you may find it's actually the simpler POM, so it'll be a fun conversation.
Thanks everybody for watching, and we will talk to you later.